Okay, so thank you very much, Denise. So the requirements for quality by design in the new guidelines states that we need to identify critical to quality factors prospectively. And here really it's very important to know that these factors with meaningful impact on participant rights, safety, well-being, and data integrity are very important. So this is really specific in what the guideline is asking us to, be identifying critical to quality factors for. The next one here is around implementing strategies to avoid, detect, address, and prevent reoccurrence of non-compliance. So how should that be, stated? I think it's really clear here around proportionate and risk-based approach. Then it talks about describing quality management approach, and this should be described in the CSR. And also here you see the last point around summarizing important quality issues, including when the quality, target lists are exceeded, or the quality target levels, were exceeded, and also the remediations. All of this information needs to go into the CSR. So there's a lot to think about here. Back to you, Denise.
Thanks, Priya. The concept of risk management was introduced in E6R2, so that part isn't new. However, study teams have really been struggling with it ever since. For years, we've seen teams that have difficulty separating risks from issues. And so now we are taking this concept of risk management and we're introducing the concept of the critical to quality factor, which is the factor that is at risk, right? And we expect study teams to struggle with this too. If you look at some of the supporting materials that have been developed by CTTI and Transcelerate, you can see that it's even muddy in these materials. For example, they consider everything to be a potential critical to quality factor. So inclusion, exclusion criteria are critical to quality factors, but training is also a critical to quality factor. Protocol design is a critical to quality factor. And so we think that this really confuses the concept of a critical to quality factor with a mitigation that might actually reduce the risk. So we kind of see more of this based on what we saw with E6R2, where everyone, in my opinion, kind of went overboard implementing tools to do risk assessment that a lot of times didn't really foresee risk. The quality tolerance limits, or the QTLs, are another potential challenge. So I've heard that there was a bit of a battle on the R3 committee about whether we should even use the term quality tolerance limits at all. And the final guidance uses the term acceptable ranges and then in parentheses, e.g. quality tolerance limits. And I guess that was the compromise. So the idea here is that we should have a threshold in mind, which, if exceeded, would constitute an impact to patient safety or data integrity. And that's a great idea, but it's sometimes really difficult to know what those thresholds should be. And my concern is that if teams are going overboard identifying 50 critical to quality factors, and then they have to come up with, 40 risks and then 40 quality tolerance limits, that they're going to guess wrong and set inappropriate limits. And so now R3 says that when these ranges are exceeded, we should do an evaluation to determine if CAPAs are needed. And so we expect that either study teams are going to be doing these evaluations way more than they would expect to because they set the wrong limits, or they're just not going to do them at all, and then they won't be in compliance. Now, along with this, we have the expectation that quality issues should be documented in the CSR. So if we set those quality tolerance limits too narrowly and we exceed them, then we're expected to document them in the CSR. So we need a process for that. And R3 also says that we have to include other quality issues in the CSR. And we've got all kinds of quality issues occurring on clinical trials. So we're going to need a process to determine, what do we put in the CSR and what do we leave out? And we hope that we don't guess wrong when a regulatory authority looks at it. So, sponsors work with a lot of vendors. Typically, they rely on their CROs to manage this risk management process. But we are seeing sponsors increasingly take this on themselves, mainly because CROs are managing a process that includes all of the activities that are outsourced to the CRO. And typically, the sponsor is managing additional activities. So, by nature, a CRO's management of risk will be a little bit narrower than the sponsor needs. For this topic, I'm including this slide, which just kind of shows how we tend to present quality by design to our trainees to differentiate between critical to quality factor, risk, quality tolerance limit, and mitigations. And I won't go over this in detail. It'll just be here in the slides if this is useful for you. And then Priya is going to talk about possible inspection questions in this area.
Yeah, thank you, Denise. And apologies, this might be a little bit small on the slide here, but what this is showing in our ReadyRoom tool are the types of questions that inspectors might ask you as sponsors during an inspection around the quality by design topic. So you can see some here, in the red zone, what critical to quality factors were identified for this study. In the orange middle zone there, the yellow color, which documentation is filed to show that HCPs or patients community were consulted. Things like, why wasn't issue X included in the CSR? What other mitigations were planned to address the risks? And I see that there is one question that's come up. Perhaps, Denise, we can quickly take this question. Which is around, so Kelly Hall, thank you, Kelly, for this question around what is the current regulatory thinking on how often risk assessment should be done or should be updated throughout the study life cycle. So I can give my view, and Denise, maybe you have a quick view on this as well. But certainly, of course, it depends on how long your study is, right? The duration of your study. Some studies can be really short. Some studies can go on for, 2-3 years. So there should be a cycle that's defined on how often a risk assessment is done. I've seen some companies have like a 3-month cycle or a 6-month cycle on risk assessment, and they have a team of people, identified to do the risk identification, assessment, and feedback as well. So Denise, I don't know if you have a quick view on this.
Yeah, so thanks, Kelly. There's no, GCP doesn't dictate any kind of cadence here. But basically, what they are going to do is look at what you have defined in your SOPs and in your plan and say that's the cadence that you need to stick to, right? So everything with GCP now is risk-based. And so in an inspection situation, you might expect to have to defend, like, why did you decide you only needed to do one risk assessment? But I think a principle of risk management is that you are revisiting your risks, and also you're looking at the issues that you've encountered and you're seeing if they affect your risks at all. Okay, and so I think we have another question. Can you provide the reference to the EMA question about data control? And yes, I have that on a slide later, so we'll highlight that when we get to it.
Yeah.
Thanks. If you have other questions, please put them in the Q&A. I want to kind of make sure we're sticking to the time. I'm just displaying here, this is an example of the kind of storyboard that you might create to show how you implemented quality by design into your study. And so this storyboard highlights the SOP that defines how critical to quality factors are documented, and then the mitigations that were put into place for this particular study. And again, this is all hypothetical, but it's an example of the kind of storyboard that I envision the teams that I work with creating as they move forward. Okay. I think we might